Washington Journal, Book TV, American History TV, and The Contenders. And we've added a handy channel finder so you can quickly find where to watch our 3 C-SPAN networks on cable or satellite systems across the country at the all-new cspan.org.
Next, a look at oil drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, 1.5 million acres of protected lands on Alaska's northern coast. Washington Congressman Doc Hastings, chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee, and Alaska Congressman Don Young have introduced a bill to permit oil exploration in ANWR. This hearing is just over an hour.
The committee will come back to order. The chair notes the presence of a quorum, which under Rule 3E is 2 members. The committee meets again today to resume its September 21, 2011 hearing on ANWR, jobs, energy, and deficit reduction. Under Committee Rule 4F1, we will go straight to the witness testimonies, and we have seated at the panel our distinguished list of witnesses: Mr. Douglas Brinkley, Professor of History at Rice University; Ms. Sarah Agnes James, Board Chair of the Gwich'in Steering Committee; Mr. Eric Pica, President of Friends of the Earth; and Ms. Lauren Pagel, Policy Director for Earthworks. For the record, at our first hearing, we heard from 2 panels, and those panels included Governor Parnell of Alaska, Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Senator Mark Begich from Alaska, Congressman Don Young from Alaska, Mr. Fenton Rexford of Kaktovik, Alaska, Mr. Tim Sharp of Labor's Local 942 in Alaska, I think it was Fairbanks, Mr. Kerry Hall, who is an ice road trucker, Mr. David Jenkins of Republicans for Environmental Protection, and Mr. Gene Karpinski from the League of Conservation Voters. For those of you that have not had the privilege or opportunity, whichever way you want to say it, to testify, your full statement will appear in the record. And I would ask you to summarize your oral remarks, and the lights in front of you, when you start, the green light comes on, that means you have 5 minutes. When the yellow light comes on, it means you're down to a minute. And then when the red light comes on, it means you're in trouble. But I'd ask you to keep your remarks as close as you possibly can to that. And once again, your full statement will appear on the record. So, Mr. Brinkley, we will start with you, and you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Microphone, please.
Turn your mic on. Press the button there.
Thank you for having me, sir. It's wonderful to be here. I'm a historian. I'm writing right now a multiple-volume history of the American conservation movement. My first volume was The Wilderness Warrior, which was on Theodore Roosevelt, Gifford Pinchot, and others at the beginning of the 20th century. My second volume that's out now is called The Quiet World, Saving Alaska's Wilderness Kingdom, 1879 to 1960. So I've recently spent quite a bit of time in Alaska, including going to the Arctic Refuge camping. And I might add that I was also the director of the Eisenhower Center, and we would collect World War II oral histories of our veterans. And I've written on D-Day and Battle of the Bulge, working on work on Quezon and the Marines at Quezon, etc. My father served in the Korean War as a ski trooper in Alaska. And I'm very glad to see Mo Udall behind me here, one of the great figures, congressional figures in American history on wilderness and Alaskan protection. I was hoping to get to meet Mr. Young, but I don't think he's here right now. He's there by the door, by the exit sign, and Mo Udall's there behind me because Mo Udall had the right idea of what to do to protect Arctic Alaska, as did Dwight Eisenhower. The Arctic was saved by Ike 50 years ago. He was not known as one of our great conservationist presidents per se at the time. He was a fiscal conservative, but he pushed for Alaska statehood very bravely, because back then, Alaska today you think of as a red state, The first two senators from Alaska were Democrats, and Ike went forward with it at any rate for the state. And that's when the Arctic Refuge got created, with the Fairbanks Daily Miner for the Arctic Refuge being created. It's become Eisenhower's Great Reserve. We just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Arctic. And it is like Yellowstone or the Grand Canyons or the Great Smoky Mountains or Big Bend. It's one of the most important treasured landscapes in the United States. And I'm here, the reason I flew in today, left my family and my 3 kids back in Austin, Texas. I came here today to propose that these kind of meetings probably need to stop. I think we're at the point now that President Obama needs to use the Antiquities Act of 1906, power that Theodore Roosevelt used so effectively to save the Grand Canyon from congressional people who wanted to mine it for zinc, copper, and asbestos, and put the coastal plain, what's called 1002, the biological heart of the Arctic Refuge, the great polar bear denning area, the key cornerstone of our marine ecosystem of America's Arctic Alaska, and create a Eisenhower National Monument, have an executive order by President Obama. I suggest we bypass Congress on this, as is done consistently. In fact, George W. Bush, our last president, used the Antiquities Act to create the largest national monument in Hawaii, our great maritime national monument, executive power. And I think the president needs to do that. We're living in a time of climate change. The Arctic Refuge is home of our charismatic animal, the polar bear. It's also a place that people get some solace in this noisy, hyper-industrialized world. We can't put how do you put a price tag on solitude? And the thought at this moment in time, in 2011, that we're looking at a 50-year reserve and talking about opening it up to Dutch oil companies and British oil companies. There are people right now trying to mine uranium out of the Grand Canyon. This seems to me to be backwards. We've got to move forward in this country. I'm all for oil. I lived for a long while in New Orleans. Petroleum dollars are important. We need to be using the Gulf of Mexico as an industrial zone that we are. But we have to have treasured landscapes, and places like Chesapeake, in my opinion, and Arctic Alaska have earned the designation of being thematic with what American conservation is. Eisenhower not only saved the Arctic Refuge 50 years ago, but he also is the person in charge of demilitarizing and not having the Antarctica developed. And why we want to call it the Eisenhower National Monument in the coastal plain is the country finally do something for Eisenhower instead of just highway signs and parkway signs. It'd be a fitting monument. I go to Anchorage, and there is an Eisenhower statue and a little memorial in there. But the role the U.S. Army's played in Alaska's history in World War II and building of the Alcan Highway, and in the current U.S. troops there, the incredible role the federal government's played in Alaska. I think our country should honor Eisenhower the way North Dakota honored Theodore Roosevelt with Theodore Roosevelt National Park in the Badlands. We should have an Eisenhower National Monument in the Arctic.
Very much for his testimony. And next I'm pleased to recognize Sarah Agnes James, the board chair of the Gwich'in Steering Committee. Ms. James, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
I'm honored to speak behalf of this committee for my nation, which is Gwich'in Nation, and I feel real honored to be here. English is my second language, so I'll address to you and translate it in my English back to English, because I speak Gwich'in and English is my second language. Ni hit I had heta ko ai ti trainen ti chancha koi ha en chikwin to kerning hi chi nang khat kwinsi kur hecha ti watsai ai chikwinsi ker ha kya ne chi wa kotlet en ku ker ha kya en chikwin to kerning hi e chiken chne tek. I say we came a long ways, we all came a long ways. We still have long ways to go, and the elders behalf of the elders that cannot be here today, and behalf of the children that's not yet born, where my people's been traveling all over the country, trying to tell a story about a special place in the world, which is sacred place where the life began, and we do that for our future generation. Back in 1988, it was alarm to our nation, there was going to be a development of gas and oil in the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The elders of the nation called a Guchen gather in Arctic Village June 5 to 10. They came together because that's what they did before. They haven't got back together for about 150 years. Because there was a border put between them, U.S.-Canadian border. And when they got there, they were very worried that nobody really knows about us or going to hear about us. But the chief, the 15 chief from 15 Guchen villages came up with a resolution and said, the only way the world will know about Guchen is that unless it's in black and white, so they pass a resolution to protect the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and the birthplace of the porcupine river caribou and Guchen way of life. It was a hard decision for them because that will bring a lot of people, the interest to that area. But they had to make that decision, and they also know that they cannot do it by themselves. So they gave us two directions to do it in a good way and teach the world in a good way why we say no to oil and gas development. Even then, the global warming, climate change was part of the conversation that went on. The way of life, caribou, is our way of life, just like the buffalo is to the Plains Indians. It's our song, it's our dance, it's our story. Even today, 75% of our diet is still wild meat, which make up of mainly caribou, moose, fish, tall sheep, small animals, and birds and ducks. We call that place up there, the coastal plain, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, we call it that means sacred place where the life began. For that reason, under the customary and traditional uses of the porcupine caribou, we draft up international Porcupine River Caribou Commission agreement. So that is signed 1987. To us, it's a human rights. We believe that we were put there by God to take care of that part of the world. That's our responsibility as Guchen people. And we didn't come from anywhere. We're not going anywhere. And we're here to stay. And the climate change is real in Alaska. And we have to make this permanent protection for our future generation. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Now I recognize Mr. Eric Pica. I hope I said that correctly?
No, you're correct.
Good. President of the Friends of the Earth. Mr. Pica, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Hastings, Representative Ranking Member Markey, and the members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. My name is Eric Pica, and I am President of Friends of the Earth United States. Friends of the Earth is a national environmental nonprofit advocacy organization, and we are a member of Friends of the Earth International, which is the world's largest federation of grassroots environmental organizations with member groups in 76 countries. Friends of the Earth has worked on environmental tax and budget issues for more than 30 years, and I have authored or written multiple reports on tax and environmental budget issues, including our Green Scissors report. The Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction has been tasked with coming up with $1.5 trillion in budget savings on top of the $900 billion of cuts that have been made this year. While I believe that the supercommittee process is deeply flawed, the Natural Resources Committee has the opportunity to do something positive for the environment and taxpayers. Instead of facing this challenge head-on, I believe that the committee is myopically focusing on increased drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge with the hopes and promises of increasing federal revenues. From the federal revenue side of the equation, drilling in the Arctic is largely speculative, largely the equivalent of investing, this is the equivalent of investing in either a subprime mortgage or, dare I say, the Greek debt. And here's why. The Congressional Research Service estimates that revenue is simply unrealistic. The $191 billion over 30 years projection assumes a 50-50 cost split between the state and federal government. Current law says that 90% of that goes to Alaska and 10% goes to the federal government. CRS also assumed a 33% tax rate for oil and gas companies. According to the Citizens for Tax Justice, and the companies they looked at, no company they look at paid that rate. And in fact, ExxonMobil, with $9.9 billion in pre-tax profits, only paid a 0.4% tax rate over the last 2 years. And finally, the estimate is over 20 years, begins in 20 years, which is still highly speculative. A better bet is simply ending existing oil and gas tax giveaways, which would save taxpayers over $300 billion in the same period, without damaging the Arctic. While these tax breaks and tax credits fall outside of this committee's jurisdiction, increasing oil royalties fall within this committee's jurisdiction. Submitting legislation to the supercommittee to fix the royalty-free oil and gas leases in the Gulf of Mexico could raise more than $53 billion. Simply raising royalty rates and taxes on oil companies could raise an additional tens of billions of dollars. The U.S. currently lags behind countries like Norway, China, Australia, and Nigeria in capturing taxpayer revenue for the resources, oil and gas resources. But this committee's jurisdiction is not limited to oil and gas resources. There is the 1872 mining law, which Lauren's going to testify on. This is a 140-year-old law that allows corporations to essentially take minerals for free off of public lands: gold, silver, copper, some of our most valuable resources. The committee can also end the $100 million a year loss in the grazing program by either ending the program or simply charging what states and other private ranchers do, which is a fair market value for grazing. And finally, we're still paying for money-losing timber sales. The savings from reevaluating natural resources and getting the federal government's fair share are just the tip of the iceberg. This August, Friends of the Earth, along with Taxpayers for Common Sense, Public Citizen, and the Heritage Institute, a libertarian organization, released the Green Scissors 2011 report, which identified more than $380 billion in savings over the next 5 years. I want to commend Congressman Markey for his legislation that I believe was introduced yesterday for taking on some of these subjects. Ending perverse incentives that are destroying our environment is an important step that this committee can make, and a great contribution it can make to the supercommittee. These are not the root problems, though. The root problems toward the environmental destruction that's occurring on our public lands is the fact that our government simply has given away the resources to corporations to do with what they please. This has to end, and the supercommittee can do something about this with the Natural Resources Committee's help. Thank you, and I welcome any questions that come along.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pika, for your testimony. And last, we'll go to Ms. Laura Pagel. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Policy Director for Earthworks, recognized for 5 minutes, and turn on your microphone.
Thank you, Chairman Hastings, Ranking Member Markey, and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak to you today about the importance of ensuring that mining companies pay their fair share to reduce the deficit and create jobs. Earthworks is a national conservation organization dedicated to protecting communities and the environment from the destructive impacts of mineral development here in the U.S. and internationally. These are direct quotes from the 2010 annual reports of the top 5 hard rock mining companies. Record underlying earnings, record cash flow, record revenue, record financial results, the best financial results in our company's history. Right now, we are subsidizing these record-breaking profits and allowing a lucrative, well-established industry to fleece the taxpayer out of millions of dollars while externalizing their environmental costs. The antiquated 1872 mining law, as Eric mentioned, still allows mining companies to take minerals from public lands for free with no royalty paid to the taxpayer. Unlike the coal, oil, and gas industries that pay a royalty, gold, copper, silver, uranium are frequently taken from our forests and other lands by both foreign and domestic mining companies with no return to the federal treasury. Real and meaningful reform of the 1872 mining law is needed to protect both taxpayers and the environment. This reform should include a fair return to the taxpayer, as well as operating and reclamation standards and the ability to balance mining with other uses. Hard rock mining companies should be required to pay a royalty similar to what other extractive industries pay, a 12.5% royalty, which is in the legislation that Mr. Markey introduced recently, would generate about $300 million a year. In addition to free minerals, mining companies receive a substantial additional subsidy called the percentage depletion allowance, which allows foreign and domestic companies to deduct their corporate income taxes, a fixed percentage of their mine-specific income. For companies that mine on public lands, this amounts to a double subsidy because the minerals weren't purchased to begin with. So they're minerals that were taken for free under the 1872 mining law, and then you receive an additional tax deduction on that. The depletion allowance is an exceptional tax break for U.S. mineral producers. The oil and gas industry has something similar, and it's beyond what's granted to other private industries. And repealing the depletion allowance for hard rock mining would save the taxpayer almost $800 million a year. We also support a reclamation fee on all hard rock mining. We must find a way to begin the tremendous task of cleaning up the hundreds of thousands of abandoned mines that litter the western United States. With a $50 billion price tag for cleanup and 40% of the headwaters of western watersheds polluted by mine waste, a dedicated source of funding is long overdue. A $200 million reclamation fee, similar to the one that is in Mr. Markey's new legislation, H.R. 3446, would clean up mines and also create at least 13,000 jobs. A steady stream of abandoned mine land funding will allow us to also stop spending money generated by the coal industry to clean up what the mess that the hard rock mining industry makes, saving the taxpayers an additional $100 million a year. Unfortunately, abandoned mines are not the only liability held by U.S. taxpayers for the mining industry. Existing mines are likely to produce even more polluted streams and scarred lands, and billions of dollars in inadequate financial assurances have been identified. Perpetual water pollution is one of the most serious consequences of large-scale industrial mining operations and one of the most costly post-closure expenditures. The problem is exacerbated by two loopholes in the Clean Water Act that allow mining companies to dump their waste directly into streams, wetlands, and lakes. By closing these two loopholes, we can prevent these long-term pollution problems. This, coupled with reforming the way that financial assurances are calculated, we can ensure that mining companies pay for the cost of doing business and American taxpayers do not. It's past time for taxpayers to stop directly subsidizing multi-billion-dollar mining companies with royalty-free mining and massive tax breaks. We also need to stop the indirect financing of these companies by allowing that allow them to foist their environmental costs of extraction onto taxpayers and communities. American taxpayers and communities that live with these pollution issues each day deserve better. Free minerals, abandoned mines, subsidies, loopholes for major environmental laws, and inadequate bonding have created an unsustainable situation in this country. It's time to repurpose these billions of dollars and put that money towards deficit reduction, job creation, and cleaning up our nation's polluted land and waters. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Pagel, I want to take this opportunity to clarify the topic of the hearing for you and the public who may be watching or listening to the broadcast of this hearing. Our invitation to you and other witnesses indicated the topic of the hearing is, and I quote, ANWR, jobs, energy, and deficit reduction, end quote. The other testimony that we have received, albeit some more than others, at least I can never say that word, is related to the topic at hand. However, other than the header, I note that your testimony doesn't even mention ANWR a single time. At best, I question the pertinence of your testimony on the subject matter of this hearing. So that being said, I'll just remind the witnesses and the members to stay on the topic, which of course is ANWR, jobs, energy, and deficit reduction. And with that, we'll enter into the question period, and I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. But I might interject at this point that I heard Ms. Pagel, as I did Mr. Pica, endorse the legislation, which I introduced with Mr. Holt and Mr. Cajalva, that calls for a larger collection of revenues from the oil industry and from the mining industry as an alternative to drilling in the Arctic refuge. And I think that is directly pertinent because they both offered an alternative to the proposal which the majority has before the committee. And I think that's right on point. In fact, as we heard earlier, upwards of $300 billion can be collected from going down that route, whereas only $600 million can be collected from the route that the majority is proposing over the next 10 years. So I think that's right on the money, and it just kind of deals with the oil industry and the mining industry as they right now get away without paying their fair share of the dues to live in our country while putting the burden on others and asking for a sacrifice to be made by, in this instance, an area of our country which has often been compared to the African Serengeti. So I think it's right on point. And maybe, Professor Brinkley, you could put this in perspective for us, okay? This question of what it is that we receive because we would try to preserve this area from having oil and other natural resources be drilled for on this location.
Well, you know, I come at this as somebody who loves America. We sing the song America the Beautiful, and we choose treasure landscapes in this country, and we protect them with our lives. Theodore Roosevelt used to say the Europeans could keep the Louvre and Westminster Abbey, but we have the Tetons, we have Redwood, California, we have the Grand Canyon. Arctic Alaska is a very significant landscape to the psyche of the American people. When you study U.S. history, wilderness is something to be treasured and preserved, particularly in the 20th century, because it reestablishes the American spirit. Many soldiers, people that were veterans from Vietnam, go up to the Arctic Refuge with backpack on to hike. Recreation dollars for the Arctic Refuge, people, myself included, camping up there. It's a ecotourism, as I write about in a book I recently did, The Quiet World, with people at Denali Lodge. Nobody thought people were going to come to Mount McKinley. Nobody thought people were going to come to see glaciers up the Inside Passage. Ecotourism is a huge industry for Alaska. To talk about saving of the Arctic is to talk about the money of the Arctic. And more as the world shrinks, you're going to have people looking for true wildernesses. The Arctic Refuge is called the last wilderness. Incidentally, it's always been called the Arctic Refuge until the oil lobby started calling it ANWR, because it sounds like Anwar Sadat or some country in the Middle East. Do you want to drill ANWR? Yes. Do you want to molest Eisenhower's Great Wildlife Reserve? No. So it's the way the issues frame. But what I've found odious over the past 50 years are people that have been saying there's no biological heart to the Arctic Refuge, that it's a wasteland, there's nothing there, a few caribou rubbing their bellies against pipes. And I know in particular Mr. Young, knows better than that because I know he's a trapper and spent time up there. The question becomes what price? How buyable are Americans? How low do we get when we start taking our key heirlooms and we start selling them to Dutch Royal Shell or British Petroleum? BP's recent report had walruses living in the Gulf of Mexico. Do we think that they know how to drill up in the Arctic? They don't. We've had spill on the tundra. This is a very fragile and special ecosystem, and the Arctic and Antarctica are World Heritage Centers. There's going to be drilling that goes on up there, but when we have our nation's largest wildlife preserve, the crown jewel of 500 wildlife reserves, and to be even suggesting in 2011, in a time of climate crisis, that we're going to drill the Arctic refuge, it's become a political issue, and I think it needs to be taken out of the committee, taken out of Congress. I think President Obama needs to sign an executive order creating a national monument for further federal protection within the Arctic Refuge.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you for raising Mo Udall's name. The first day he was here as chairman was my first day on the committee 35 years ago.
They're a great American family, the Udall family.
And so thank you so much for raising his name and memory because it means a lot to so many of us on the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time of the gentleman has expired. In response to my friend, I just remind him that this is an extension of an earlier hearing, which was ANWR. The gentleman could have correctly brought up what he brought up with his remarks this morning, when in fact we did have a subcommittee hearing of energy mineral subcommittee, where in fact that testimony would have been pertinent. But this is a testimony about ANWR. Chair recognizes.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just to say that I felt that we needed this hearing so that the deficit reduction aspect of that hearing that we've already had was properly inserted into the record.
Well, just tell the gentleman that the hearing, I mean, one can read into whatever one wants on the direction of where developing the resources in ANWR would go, but the hearing was on ANWR.
In its deficit reduction.
Well, but the hearing was on ANWR. With that, I'll recognize the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Young.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for having this hearing. I will tell you, if you ever want to see an exercise in futility, it's this hearing. That side's already made up its mind. This side has already made up its mind. And I call it garbage, Dr. Rice, that comes from the mouth.
Dr. Brinkley, Rice is a university.
Well, okay, I know
you went to
Dr. Rice.
Yuba
I'll call you
College
anything I want to call you.
graduate.
Sit in that chair.
Pardon?
You just be quiet.
Well, but
you
why?
be quiet.
You don't own me. I
don't
pay your
own
salary.
You, but I can tell you right now.
The gentleman will suspend, and I'll remind members, and I'll remind
I work
witnesses.
for the private sector. You work for the
Mr. Brinkley, you are invited here to testimony, and we look forward to your testimony. You got the time to say what at least was on your time within the time constraints.
And call me Mr. Rice. I needed to correct the record.
Mr. Brinkley.
Okay.
We see a lot of people here, and from time to time we make faux pas. Nobody is perfect here. But to interrupt breaks the comedy of what we're trying. We're going to have disagreements here. You've already seen that.
He called me
we try to do that. We try to do that in a way that is civil.
In the word Mr. Rice.
Mr. Brinkley,
you would do that if somebody said that to your name too.
Mr. Brinkley, I've been called a lot of things in my time.
I wouldn't call you that. You're a good congressman.
Mr. Brinkley, do you want to continue sitting at this panel?
Yes.
Okay, then please follow the rules.
Okay.
What I'm suggesting,
Mr. Young.
Mr. Brinkley,
Thank you.
you say you've been up there. You camped one time.
Yes.
How many people were that ever visited the Arctic Wildlife Range last year?
Not many.
Not many. So we have
Probably
sort of an elitist group we're going up there. An elitist group. Well, now, I have been all over that area.
I know you have.
And I know what I'm talking about. The Arctic plain is really nothing. You say it's not the heart. It is not the heart. It is not the heart. It is part of the most deficit part of the area. And what hurts me the most is you sit there in the Rice University, when the people support drilling for their good and for the good of this nation, as a college professor in an ivory tower, you can go up there and camp and spend your time, and I hope you spend a lot of money. But the reality is this area should be drilled. I've been fighting this battle for 39 years. It was set aside for drilling, not by the oil companies, but by Scoop Jackson, by Ted Stevens, by the administration, because they knew the potential was there. And we did put the safeguards in there that the Congress have to vote on it. Now, you can go all the pontificate you want. That refuge is 19 million acres. 19 million acres. We're talking about less than 3,000 acres. A little tiny thing. It's like the hair on your head. You pull one hair, you're not going to miss it. And this country is starving itself because we're buying foreign oil. They say that we don't need the Arctic Wildlife Range is wrong. And I'm listening to the people that live there, not the people that live 400 miles away, not the people that live in Fairbanks, not the people who say they represent a certain group when they do not. I'm not saying about that. I'm saying let's listen to the people that live there. 76% of Alaskans support it, and everybody that I know of on that coast, other than a small group of people, say it's the right thing to do because they know it can be done. It's 74 miles from the pipeline. 74 miles from the pipeline. Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for the interruption. I made a mistake when I said Mr. Rice, because I heard the Rice University, and that can get in my mind. But like I say, when we're here, we're the ones that ask the question. You answer the questions. And you may not work in the private sector.
I do work.
And by the way, I'm not asking you a question yet. You may not. And when you think about it a moment, you made a comment about me, and is why I'm really pissed right now, is because you, in fact, said that I wasn't here. I was over in the flow voting.
I know you were.
Okay, then don't mention my name.
I was mentioning.
I yield back the time.
Portraits behind me.
Time of the gentleman yields back his time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. James, could you tell us again the name that the Gwich'in call the region, the wildlife refuge region, both in the Gwich'in language and in a translation, please?
Ishikwatsangwantaygot means a sacred place where the life begins.
Where the life begins.
Mm-hmm.
I think that highlights the significance that this is more than a local issue. There's much more that derives from this than the entertainment of a few elite people, I think. This is, I think, a national treasure. Mr. Pika, we've heard it over and over again, and as recently as a few minutes ago, that this area is visited by so few people. And it should be a local issue. What do you have to say to that? And maybe it helps to keep in mind what Mr. Brinkley said earlier about the so few people who were visiting Yosemite, the so few people who were visiting. It was only a little over 120 years ago that anybody went through the Grand Canyon. It was so few people that visited Glacier, and on and on. Would you comment, please?
Yeah, these are federal lands, and the federal taxpayer and the federal government has a right to preserve these lands and protect these lands how the majority of Americans feel they need to protect it. And there are some places in this country, and there are some places globally, that should not be exploited for natural resource extraction, and that includes oil and gas. Everywhere where oil and gas drilling occurs, there are spills, there are leaks, there is significant damage that occurs. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is one of those places where I think we can say we don't need to damage any more places.
And I'd like to give both you and Ms. Pagel an opportunity to address this concern that somehow you are off topic. Isn't what we're talking about here whether lands that belong to the American people should be given to private exploitation without royalty, without recompense?
Precisely. If I look at how much oil royalties the state of Alaska is getting, it far exceeds what the federal government's getting right now. So if we want to talk about what's fair for the taxpayer, we need to talk about what the federal government is getting for those areas that are currently open for exploitation and exploration. And it's far below what even the state of Alaska is getting.
Ms. Pagel?
I agree that there are some places that just shouldn't be mined or drilled, and this is one of those places, and that, my testimony was about there are alternatives. I want to reduce the deficit and create jobs for this country just as much as anyone else, and there are ways to do that that don't necessarily involve exploiting places that are sacred to some.
Mr. Brinkley and Ms. James, earlier today, this subcommittee of this committee considered a Alaska energy bill that would allow 10,000 acres of impact to the coastal plain for every 100,000 acres of leased land in the refuge. In other words, and maybe you're not familiar with this, but perhaps you could comment on it. The question is just how small is the footprint? How much environmental damage would be done if these treasures were allowed for private exploitation?
To my people, any technology in the world is not as safe for any birthplace and a sacred place where the life began. That's how we see it. And when there was an oil spill in Prince William Sound, one of our elders said the water is dead, and it's been happening. And from that day, we call that day the water is died. So we're very cautious about those things that happen and what we see and what we hear and what weather is doing. And we lived there for thousands of years with caribou. And caribou is like, they're in our heart, and we are in their heart, and we take care of each other for thousands of years. And there's no place in the world that's as safe as that place.
Thank you. I'm sorry, my
time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Harris, is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I'll tell you, reading over the testimony, I kind of share your pessimism that the testimony is pertinent to ANWR. But since the testimony opens the door for such kind of questions, I'm going to ask Mr. Pica, or is it Pike? I'm not sure. That's right, because I know we had a state senator in Maryland very well known by the same last name. I find your written testimony very interesting because actually the first page sounds like kind of a manifesto, I guess, against American capitalism, so I suppose that you take a position against it. But the last sentence of the first page says, in the last decade, the influence of big business has expanded to such an extent that our civil and political systems have largely been captured by corporate lobbyists and campaign donations. Now, is it your opinion or the opinion of Friends of the Earth that Solyndra absolutely epitomizes that relationship? The whole debacle about Solyndra and corporate donation connections and things like that?
I would think that Friends of the Earth actually opposed the loan guarantee program when it was first created in 2005.
Right.
And we had predicted that the process would be open for manipulation, regardless of which party occurred.
So even if it's an administration that promised a change and we're not going to let lobbyists do anything. So your opinion, I guess you kind of share the opinion maybe on this side of the aisle that Solyndra is really that kind of problem.
I haven't seen all the testimony. I haven't been privy to it, but I do believe that this was a bad program to begin with, and this was a 2005 program that was when it was created.
Yeah, sure. But the loan was administered in 2009. Is that correct? The Solyndra loan guarantee. It was
Yes.
a 2005 program. It was greatly expanded by the stimulus plan, and in fact, it was a result of the stimulus plan that the money eventually was guaranteed.
I'm not familiar with those.
Let's go on to the next paragraph in your testimony, because it says, today functions that were once the domain of the public sector, from the provision of services to the protection of our commons to the fighting of wars, have been taken over by corporations. You really think that our soldiers and sailors who are overseas fighting wars are taken over by corporations? You really think that we fight wars with corporations, not with young men and women, Americans going overseas, trying to do the best they can? Do you realize the implication of the words you put down on paper here?
I do believe that the Blackwater incidents that have occurred in the Middle East is a prime example of where we have had privatization of what should be the State Department security forces.
So, well, thank goodness you don't imply that that's our soldiers and sailors. Now, you also say that in here you say, even if the Congressional Research Service's estimates on what we could gain from this turn out to be accurate, it's simply not worth the environmental destruction it would create. Don't say it could create, might create. There's, a 1 in 100 chance of, a spill or something. Could you just very briefly outline, because I don't have much more time, what the environmental destruction that it would create? Just use the word would.
Yes, every pipeline that we know of leaks. The Keystone XL pipeline or the Keystone 1 pipeline, a brand new pipeline, has leaked over a dozen times.
And how large were those leaks?
They're fairly substantial leaks.
So, can you compare them to the natural leaks of oil in the United States?
I don't have those statistics.
Could I ask you to look into that? Since
Sure.
you bring that up as part of your testimony, could I ask you to look into that and just compare those two? Thank you. And let me get to another, because you bring up the Keystone XL. What's your opinion about the Keystone XL pipeline project?
The President made the right decision in delaying that pipeline. The process of environmental review was fundamentally flawed.
Is that because it was done by the State Department, or they just didn't take 3 years, just wasn't long enough?
I think that the documents that Friends of the Earth exposed with the State Department demonstrated that the relationship between TransCanada, the company Cardinal Entrix, actually violated the intent of the National Environmental Policy Act.
Is Friends of the Earth going to oppose the pipeline that's going to be built westward to the Canadian ports so the oil could be shipped to...
If the gentleman would suspend just for a moment, the Keystone pipeline, again, is not subject of this, too. I know that sometimes we get off tangentially.
I know, Mr. Chairman, but your point is, I mean, I was led there. I didn't wander. I was led. Are the Friends of the Earth going to oppose that pipeline as well?
Yes.
The pipeline. So you just basically don't want the oil to be extracted anywhere. But you got to ship it somehow if you extract it.
We believe that the tar sands, the boreal forests that are in Alberta need to be preserved. They're a biological rich area, and they are perhaps one of the most biological rich areas comparative to the tropical rainforests down in Brazil and South America.
Yeah, they sure are rich, and oil's part of the biology, and Canada's lucky they're using it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The time of the gentleman has expired. Mr. Grijalva is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Pica, just a couple of quick questions. And I wasn't terribly disturbed by that paragraph, but why the CRS is projecting on their study more revenue from taxes than from royalties. Why is that?
Because the CRS is looking at the corporate business tax rate, which is 33%. And we just know through studies and through the amount of tax deductions and tax loopholes that are currently in the tax code that that's just not a realistic estimate coming from the Congressional Research Service.
And we've been subsidizing oil and gas industry for how long?
Well, the tax code was originally created in 1911. About 2 years after that was when the oil and gas industry burrowed its first tax credit into the tax code. It was a percentage depletion allowance. And so for nearly 100 years, the U.S. government has been providing some sort of subsidy to the oil and gas industry for exploitation and exploration of oil and gas resources in America.
Yeah, and despite the claims made by the proponents of drilling in the refuge about the revenue that would be generated, the Congressional Budget Office projects that taxpayers would only see $3 billion over the first 10 years. In addition, Alaska state officials have often said they would sue to recover 90% of drilling revenues if the refuge was open. That means that if they were successful, the taxpayers would receive about $600 billion. So I think not that it's not just about the subsidies. There's other things at stake here. But if that's the main proponent argument, it's full of holes, and there is no net return for the taxpayer if it was to happen. So what, does the industry, given what's happened the last 2 or 3 quarters, really need subsidies to drill? And that's the question, if you don't mind.
I would say, given their multi-billion dollars in profits, I think they have almost $1 trillion in profits over the last 10 years. I would say they don't need the incentives to drill. Okay,
and let me just, one general question for all the panelists, and I appreciate you taking your time on Friday. This committee has recommended, majority, drilling in the refuge to be part of the super committee's recommendations for revenue generation. Your reaction to that recommendation, if you don't mind, beginning with Dr. Brinkley.
Well, it's an awful idea. Again, and I need to correct a record because there are C-SPANs covering this, and there was a misstatement made by the congressman who's yet again left, doesn't stay, blows smoke, and then leaves. But Ted Stevens had been for the creation of ANWR in 1960. Ted Stevens was a lawyer for the creation of the Arctic. It's only when oil was found there
the gentleman,
that they wanted to break.
I appreciate that, but I'm on a clock.
Yep. Okay.
The gentleman will suspend.
Point, so
yes.
The gentleman will suspend. I'll give the time back to you.
Okay.
I just want to say, Mr. Brinkley, people come and go from this committee meetings all of the time. And to suggest that there is not a reason that one member leaves for a good reason that you don't know about, I think is disrespectful.
I was just
at
disappointed.
Best. Disrespectful at best. So I would appreciate if you would respond to the questions that members are giving you. Okay. You will see members walk in and out of here all the time. Everybody has their own schedule.
Ted Stevens' record. I was trying to correct it.
Well, you referenced a member that was sitting here.
Because he's the one who misstated. If we don't correct the record now, when is it going to get corrected?
You could have misstated that. You could have made the observation that rather than elaborating on the whereabouts of people. You need to be respectful of people because they come and go all the time.
Okay.
The gentleman probably had what 3.5 minutes or so when I interrupted.
5. No. Just.
Well, nice try. But I'll give you
appreciate it.
I'll give you another 2 minutes in the red when it goes.
And the general question was the majority of the committee recommending to the super committee that drilling in the refuge would be a revenue generator that they'd like to see the super committee make as part of their recommendation. Dr. Brinkley, it's an awful idea.
It should have nothing to do, the super committee, with the Arctic Refuge. It's our nation's #1 premier wildlife refuge. Just because we hit low economic times is not the time to start opening up treasured landscapes. Okay. And this happens in history time and again. There was an effort by Congress to mine the Grand Canyon for zinc, asbestos, and copper when the economy gets bad. Okay. We have to be a tougher people than that.
Let me give your fellow panelists a chance. Ms. James?
Yes, thank you for asking me that question, because to us, sacred place where the life began, there's no other place in the world that needs to be protected. It's a special place that needs to be protected, and there shouldn't be any gas or oil development there because it's belonged to all of us American. And so far, since 1988, Americans have spoken loud and clear repeatedly. Battles after battles spoke out very clearly that they don't want no gas and oil development there. Let's give those Americans a chance of what they wanted. And that's what the land is for. It's a public interest land for the voters.
Thank you. No, I thought, if I'm not mistaken, there was over 1 million comments. And I don't think those should be readily ignored as we go through this process. Mr. Pika, if you don't mind.
Absolutely not. If the super committee is looking for where to get revenue, it should be through drilling into the tax code. There are tens of billions of dollars. I think we have $100 billion in tax breaks if they were repealed.
Absolutely not. And I think that there are better ways, and those are the ways that we need to look at. My testimony, I've laid out at least a couple $1 billion a year in savings, the legislation, HR 3446, that was just introduced lays out another couple billion, and we need to think about the long term and fairness. And there are industries that are not paying now that can afford to, and we need to look at that first.
There's other issues with that environmental, cultural, that are critical and that should not be ignored. But I wanted to concentrate on the money side because that seems to be the primary argument. And one could surmise that I don't know if this has as much to do with energy independence and economy as it does with the timing, the political expediency, because of the times that we're in. And just for the record, Mr. Chairman, thank you. There are more private contractors in security in Iraq and Iran than there are Afghanistan than there are uniformed American men and women. I just thought I'd put that in the record. Thank you.
The time of the gentleman this time did expire. Gentlelady from Massachusetts, Ms. Songas, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I'm listening to the debate, it's bringing back a lot of memories, because I remember in 1980 when my husband was a relatively newly elected United States Senator. He was very proud to work on the Alaska Lands Act and work with then Senator Ted Kennedy and Ted Stevens. And I remember so clearly when finally that act was voted on and signed into law. It was quite a moment to celebrate. But I think we also knew that we were not locking the door on Alaska, the beautiful landscape there that's been protected. And here we are in very dramatic and difficult economic times in our country. We know we have to deal with our debt and deficit. We know we have to deal with our dependence on fossil fuels and foreign oil in particular. And so Alaska is again at the forefront. But as we hear this testimony from all of you, how you value so much the extraordinary landscape, the sacred place that you call it as well, we're faced with trying to find a balancing act. And it comes, whatever we may get out of it in the near term, it obviously comes with great cost. And so one of the issues I think we have to ask and think about is, as we also have to wrestle with climate change, and we know that there has been a warming there, just what the impacts would be there too, again creating extraordinary costs that we would have to confront in the coming years if we're not sensitive to this. So it is not just about jobs today or access to oil, which even we know will take many years to really come to fruition. It's about sacrificing an extraordinary landscape and perhaps also exacerbating another great challenge we have, which is climate change. So I would welcome, Mr. Pica, your thoughts and anybody else who would like to say something about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The debate over the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, we talk about jobs, we talk about subsidies and royalties and how much money could come into the federal government. But what we also have to be thinking about with climate change is the ability that these natural resources are going to be dramatically impaired by what's already occurring in the atmosphere. And that drilling into these resources by erecting wells, pipelines, we will be impairing these, and we will be making it more difficult for these ecosystems and the wildlife that thrives on these ecosystems to survive. And that, to me, is a risk that we should not be taking at this time, nor in the future.
Does anybody else, Mr. Brinkley?
I just think that both Democrats and Republicans know we are in a time of climate crisis. And the idea after the BP spill of drilling in the Arctic Refuge, our nation's largest wildlife refuge, created by Dwight Eisenhower, a conservative Republican president, at this moment in time makes zero sense. There are a lot of other issues. It's not, if we were going to go for, we would have no park system. Believe me, we would have no national forest, because the extraction industries want to make money and go. They like to gouge. And we've got to have watchdog groups and keep eyes on them. But to hear a congressman today say there's nothing in his district, it's boring, it's flat, it's not exciting. I don't know a representative that doesn't love their district. Every state in America's landscape's beautiful if you love it. But some people love money more than their homeland or where they live, and I'm afraid that that's why this fight has to keep coming up. 50 years later, we're still trying to tell people the Arctic Refuge is real. It belongs to the American people, all of us, not just the people of Alaska.
Behalf of the Kutch Nation, we call that place, you know, I repeatedly saying that a birthplace, and any birthplace should be protected. And we've been there for thousands of years. We're healthy. I'm 67 years old right now, and I'm pretty healthy. And I live in the village. We live very healthy life, and because most of our food is from the land, and it's good for us and make us who we are and be proud of who we are. I'm proud to be Kutch. I'm proud to be Caribou people. And any of our resource or any of the things that we use that making us healthy and powerful is that and there's no price on it. And taking care of the caribou has always been our job. And we're rich in our heart that way. And I just can't see that be taken away as human rights, protection of human rights to me and to my people. Thank you.
Time of the gentlelady has expired. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Hanabuso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the panel. I come at this from a different perspective, just so you know that up front. And the reason is because I represent Hawaii, and Hawaii has indigenous people as well. So when we were first, I'm very new here, but in my first exposure to ANWR, it was in terms of the, Congressman Young is not here to correct my pronunciation, but it's the Katovik, I think it's is it Katovik, Ms. James?
Yes, Katovik is
Kaktovik,
right at the border of Tianutu.
Of the coastal, right? The coastal plain.
Yes.
Yes. So my first question for Mr. Pika and Ms. Pagel is, have you ever been to ANWR, the both of you?
I have not, but Friends of the Earth has members in Alaska that we represent here in Washington, D.C.
I understand that, because I haven't. So I'm interested in those who have. So that's Ms. James, who lives, I believe, part of ANWR, and Mr. Brinkley, who has recently visited there. And first of all, Ms. James, you are, of course, a member of the Gwich'in?
Yes, Gwich'in.
Gwich'in tribe.
Gwich'in and Puchi in the front is Gwich'in.
Gwich'in. And the first question I have, because when we talk about Alaska, ANWR, as well as the rights of the natives, my first question is, are you part of the Anska settlement? Is your tribe part of that?
Arctic Village and Winnie-Tai didn't go with Anska. We went with IRA now is simple fee title, and we got 1.8 million acres of land.
Okay, where are you in relationship to the to ANWR? Are you located within?
It's about 75 miles south of coastal plain.
Oh, okay. So you're actually, I saw pictures of it. So we have the coastal plain, and then you have the mountains. So you're more in the mountainous section of ANWR? Are you more in the mountainous section of ANWR?
Oh, the Brooks Range is a natural. God put it there that between Inupiaq and Gwich'in. So that's Inupiaq, this one is Gwich'in.
Now, I'm sure all of you know that one of the interesting points with how the Katovik tribe comes before us is the fact that the federal government, after entering into ANSCA, and it normally retains the subsurface rights to the regional corporation, Katovik was able to secure the subsurface rights, unlike other tribes, because of the fact that the government, we took other parts of their land. It was conditioned upon Congress giving them the right to drill, however, but they do have the subsurface rights, which normally flows to the regional corporation. So to me, this is an issue of the rights of Native people. And as you know, we bought Alaska from the Russians. And part of the compact when we entered into that agreement was we agreed that we would not interfere with the rights of the Native people. Now, I'm not talking about energy. I'm not talking about the super committee, and maybe the chair will rule me out of order. But that's what I'm concerned about. I want to know how, when you know that we are talking about rights of Native peoples, that we as a government has given them the rights to the subsurface as well as the surface rights. And what they're looking at here is to really execute on those rights. Why is that something that you find to be such a travesty and something that is unacceptable? And Ms. James, I know that you're in a slightly different position because your tribe relies on caribou. Katovics rely on whales and seals, as I understand it. But let's start with you, Mr. Brinkley. This is an issue, to me, of Native rights. And this is an agreement and a contract that was entered into when we bought Alaska, and now we're in this position. So can you explain to me why you think that
there was a similar up in northern Alaska in the 1950s and 1960s when Edward Teller, father of the hydrogen bomb, went to Alaska and wanted to detonate nuclear bombs amongst the native people, which would have contaminated all of the tundra, poisoned all of the caribou. There are always these projects up in an area like that where people don't have a lot of power and a lot of rights. And the Arctic Refuge is a home today for native people that live in the refuge.
Mr. Brinkley, that's the 56, that's before we entered into these agreements. And I do not believe that the regional councils or the tribes are not well represented by their respective attorneys. Yes. I do not believe that they're in lesser bargaining positions. And again, that's my issue, and I'd appreciate, since I'm out of time, I'd appreciate it if you'd all respond to me in writing. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
The time of the gentlelady has expired, and I would say that as usual with hearings like this, after the fact, there are questions that come up. And we would like, when you do get asked a question, obviously Ms. Hanabusa has a very serious question she'd like a response to. That response should come to the full committee so we all have that, response. With that, the panel is now dismissed. And I want to thank them very much for being here today. If there's no further business to come before the committee stands adjourned.
Thank you.